Yes, okay, welcome back. It's that time of the day, it's that time of the week, it's that time of the month. It's 2021. You are wherever you are, and I am right here to help you through this. This is Band on Band. This is the second episode of the year. Thanks for sticking with us. Thanks for listening to all the previous episodes. If you're new, it's a simple concept. It's BSM bands and friends talking about their favourite BSM bands, past and present. In this episode, we have Ben from the amazing Alpha Male Tea Party, and he is talking to us about another great math rock band, Axes. Enjoy the chat. Hello, Ben. Welcome to Band on Band. Good evening. How are you?
Good evening. I'm knackered, utterly knackered, but otherwise cannot complain.
The best way to start a podcast, explaining how tired you are.
How tired and how little I have to give. But no, we're going to talk about a band I absolutely love. So I'm gonna kick into sort of backup energy and really,
the reserves
kick things into gear.
So
yeah, exactly.
You picked Axes, which
yes, I did.
It's a surprise pick. No one's picked them yet, so I always like it when someone picks someone who's not been picked yet. So when did you discover Axes? How did you feel? How was that experience? Because they are quite a earful to listen to.
They're an experience. They are an experience. That's a great word to use to describe them. So when I first joined Alpha Male Tea Party, I wasn't really aware of math rock. I was aware of Alpha Male Tea Party, and that was kind of it. And then my first set of proper shows with AMTP was a 4-date run with Axes, and the first gig was in Hartlepool, of all places, a real hub of math rock, a thriving hub of nothing, it would seem. But at the time, anyway, it might have changed. But I remember Tom raving about them because he produced the first EP. And so I was like, all right, okay. And then they played, and there was about, next to fucking no one in the room. But they lit up the whole place. They lit up they lit up my life in that like half an hour, 40-minute set. I was like, this is sexy, this is intricate, this is like invigorating all at once. I was like, what the fuck? Oh, I'm glad I'm going on tour with these and I can see them 3 more times in a row. So that was my first experience of them.
They definitely have that sort of musical audacity, I call it, where you just there's those sort of bands that will, no matter where they're playing, will wow everyone who's there, even if it's like 2 people or 2 people. But I always got that when I've never seen them live, but I got that from the record Glory when I listened to that for the first time. I guess like that is, like I said, I've never seen them live, but I can imagine the pure, I mean, talent is the only word that I can seem to think about. What was it like sort of witnessing that in the flesh, and then subsequently watching them, I guess, play the same set 4 nights in a row? And
yeah, I mean, it's mad because it's like, it's so full of charisma. They're so full of charisma. So you've got like Xion, who just exudes this sexual energy that, men, women, and children instantly fall in love with him. He's just... he's beautiful. He's a beautiful man. And then you've got Paul, who is just a bundle of like sugar, kind of energy, just kind of constantly moving. And then you've got Stacey sort of keeping everything grounded. Her and Al just keeping the ship sailing. Do you know what I mean? But it's kind of it's an absolute oral delectation. It really is that you just kind of you can't help but love them because they're, even like you said before, Ammonia having like, even if they only played to 2 people in the room, it's, I think a lot of it transcends that for them. It's about the pure joy of them playing together, because like when they play together, it just looks like, it might not be, but it looks like that's the only thing they want to do in the world. And it's when you see a band like that, when you see a whole band, because sometimes you see a band and it's like the drummer's having the time of his life, but the guitarist would rather be fucking doing anything else. But with them, it's like the four of them, that's all they want to do. And woe betide if you get in that way.
Yeah, I get that. I get that feeling with a lot of math rock bands, especially when I feel like, I mean, I remember watching, I mean, back at Arctangent, watching a plethora of math rock bands that seem to, on one hand, be like enjoying that they're on stage and performing for people and people getting out of it. But you could almost see that they're all looking at each other being like, we're shit hot.
You get that occasionally at Arctangent. I think you know, in something that might end up proving an unpopular comment, I think they're miles above most math rock bands personally, because they've got huge, like, the music is full of character, and it's full of it's not just being technical for the sake of being technical, which I've never been into, and I won't name bands who are like that because that's just slacking bands. But there's a lot of bands who do the technical stuff and forget to write a tune, or they forget to kind of really put themselves into the song, because it's being in a math band who, you know, math and commas, a band who don't sing very much. You know, how you portray your character and your personality is a lot more difficult than I think for a band who sings, because, you know, you've got a band who sings, and like, is it La Dispute you've got? Is it La Dispute or Touche More? Am I thinking about? I'm not mad into those two bands, but one of those bands has got, I know they've got an album about, is it Stage 4?
Oh yeah, Touche.
Touche, right. So we've got that Stage 4. Now, that, you know, when you listen to, they're not my favourite band, but when you listen to that guy sing, you're like, that's all you need to know about that person in that one record, even one tune. You know everything about that, but, you know, but with instrumental bands, it's a lot harder to do that. But I think Axe's like pour every sinew of character into what they do. I could talk forever about that band.
Well, you're in the right place, I guess. I agree. It's almost like the traditional, like, sort of melody lines that you would get from a vocalist has to be sort of absorbed by the instrumentation and sort of how those instruments feed off each other. I think in Glory specifically, I think they do that. They do that really, really well. But they've obviously got the self-titled record before. Out of the two, what would you say is the one that you enjoy the most, and why?
Glory, but that's not to say the EP isn't without its moments, because it's like one of those that it sort of sets you at a particular sort of point in time. So we toured with them quite a bit around that point. And, you know, there's songs like Fleetwood Mac and John Bonjela and Wet, 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 which
classic.
Kind of, yeah, well, they're really, really evocative, especially that bit in Wet, 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 where it kind of, you know, after there's like, I don't know, let's say 40 seconds of pure sort of chaos, and then you've got that almost like sing-along bit that kind of, it sort of stokes the fires of your heart, and yeah, so. But I think the production on Glory is stunning. It really is. It's kind of like just little things like the use of different snares or snare tuning for Al, especially on a tune like Real Talk, which is a fucking bananas tune, which is it's yeah, a real just a journey of a tune. But Glory, I think from start to finish just has a huge amount of character to it. I briefly tried a bit of running during the first lockdown. I now know that I can't stand running. But I tried it, and one of the things I tried to soundtrack my running to was Glory, and it was like, and I live in Wales, and I live in like the mountains of North Wales, and sort of like running up the mountain. I mean, I can't really run up mountains. It was up gentle inclines, but with glory in the background. It was like I was in Rocky Four. Like if you've heard the Rocky Four soundtrack with Hearts on Fire and things like that, you just like you feel, yeah, you get like a huge surge of adrenaline, especially with an opener like the One.
The One is
so cool, and so like just the final groove in that, it just sits on that one note for like a minute and a half, and you can't. Yeah, I always think like, do you remember like reading Total Guitar magazine when you were a kid, and there'd always be an interview with the band and it'd say, "Oh, which song do you wish you'd written?" And I always think there's like a couple of ones, but I always think that fucking riff. I wish I'd written that riff. I can't think of anything cooler.
To get away back in time and write that, then the world would be okay.
Well, yeah, well, no, it wouldn't be. But I think maybe my life would have been, incrementally better. Let's say.
Yeah, it would have got you a stone cold 29,000 plays on Spotify.
Well, yes, exactly. Sorry, I'm just putting a little. I've got an enormous grey throw I'm going to put over me because my heating doesn't kick in for another half an hour.
Oh, that's a thing to have.
You got to love throws.
I remember when I sort of was first discovering sort of like the BSM roster in like 2009, 2008, 9, 10 sort of time, which was before Axis. But when was that? When the first Axis EP was what, 2013?
2014, because I joined AMTP in 2013, and then they'd recorded it and Tom produced it. And I think it was on the cusp of 2013, 2014, something like that.
It was that sort of time where like it felt like that every math rock band of weight was coming out on BSM. I mean, that was sort of the same time that Delta Sleep was around and yourselves were sort of coming up. Was there sort of like, as someone who maybe was a little bit more present in that time, was it interesting to see, looking into the genre, like how people were relating to that music? Did it feel like a real like timepiece, or did it feel like it was the starting of something a little bit bigger, something that people could get behind in the genre?
I think so. I think with the sort of prevalence of Arctangent, really, Arctangent. I think Arctangent, BSM, a couple of other labels have been just hugely vital to the lifeblood of bands. Even if bands haven't been on BSM, the fact that you've got bands, who are similar to them to kind of pave the way. Do you know what I mean? Like, because it wasn't until our third record, Health. It's always confusing because I'm not on the first one. So the third record. But even though the album before Droids, you've got bands like, we'd reference and say, we've played with, or we like bands like, I know Tom's a huge sort of Tube Lord fan, and sort of bands like that, and you kind of sort of helped to pave the way, really. But yeah, I think I didn't know much of the scene prior to 2013, 2014, but at that point you start to sort of spot these really there starts to be a lot more of them, a lot more bands, and you start to spot the really interesting ones at that point, just because there's more of the bands. And especially for me, who hadn't been to the first Arctangents, I didn't really know of BSM other than I Pulled Apart by Horses release, because I was well into them. So yeah, I think you're right. I think it was at the turning of that kind of when Axis, when around about that first EP, 2014. In my opinion, that's where kind of the scene blossomed almost, if you will. I think.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I was sort of blessed to be in and around what I sort of refer to as the Kingston scene in 2009 to 2015, where it felt like Tube Lords, Meet Me In, all that sort of London sort of math rock was kicking off, and it was a really nice time to try and be a musician, as I was going, God, I would love to play drums like these people. Never.
Yeah.
As a musician yourself, obviously, what is it about Axes sort of inspires you? What do you draw from them when you, as someone who's just recently written and recorded and released a record? What is it that you draw from Axes?
I mean, it's you know, you got things like Stagecraft. I think they are like they're a band who without you kind of really, without it being incredibly obvious to the naked eye, they've got their stagecraft down to just like a fine art, and it's like it's not choreographed or anything like that, you know. Although I would really like to see a choreographed stage routine with those four. I think it'd be fucking awesome. I don't know. At one point they were on about doing a lot more poppier kind of stuff, and I was just like, I was like dreaming of some dance routines. But I think they just kind of the interplay between the four of them, the fact, and that's the kind of thing. I don't know. You develop your own sort of stage persona or whatever. But like the way you play on stage, you go from it just being, I'm on stage, I'm really trying not to forget this riff because it's in a time signature I can't count. Then you kind of, and then when you become more confident with it all, you start to think about, okay, or at least subconsciously, you're like, what am I gonna do? Am I gonna be a stand and am I gonna be a shoegazer, or am I gonna be a stand, or am I gonna be, whatever? But they kind of, it's all very natural to them. But the interplay between the four of them, you'd see that and you'd be like, yeah, I want to do more interplay. I want to kind of, I want to make it look like we're having a good time, because we are having a good time, but I want to make it look like we're having a good time. So that's, there's that. But it's also the fact that, because they technically are, unbelievable musicians, but I think you wouldn't necessarily, that wouldn't be the first thing that struck you. The thing that struck you would be, that kind of, that interplay, that energy, but the melody, and the fact that they work a lot around sort of major keys to get, a tiny bit technical. They work a lot around major key sort of chord progressions. And a lot of bands who do that sound quite dull. I know, I'm not going to name anyone. I'm not going to slag off an entire genre or anything like that. But there's quite a lot of bands who play with major chord progressions, with throwing the occasional minor key, and it just sounds like anyone else. But Axis don't sound like anyone else. And they're doing these major and minor chord progressions, and, without it sounding too, they don't go into mad sort of bitonal territories or whatever. They kind of, I'm rambling a lot. I tend to do that. But they kind of, they play with their melodies are very, very, very strong. Really strong. So there's a lot to take. There's a lot to take from them.
Yeah, I think they're a really good band. Are they on? Then they're either they're not broken up, but I feel like they're on. I can't even remember if they're broken up or if they're one of those on indefinite hiatus sort of groups.
I don't think they never really ever said. I think it just kind of, they do shows. I think life happens. Like, I know a couple of them had children, but maybe bought houses, things like that. They all do a variety of different kind of music. I know Stacey and Al are in like a stoner sort of stoner doom kind of band. The name escapes me.
420.
What's that? Sorry.
I just was making a hilarious weed joke saying that they were probably called 420.
420 Blaze It Yo. Yeah, that's what they're called. That's that band. Yeah, Fat Bags, that's what they're called. And then Paul's got his Human Pyramids thing, which is utterly glorious from record to record. Gian has a kind of electro dance thing called Brutal Deluxe, which is fucking brilliant as well. And it's just, again, so sexy. But yeah, in terms of being Axes, and with Paul, I know a lot about this band, but because they're mates, I'm very fortunate to call them mates. But I know Paul lives up in Glasgow, so the kind of logistics of being a band and operating 6 hours away from each other means that naturally you're going to come to a bit of a, you're going to slow down a bit. I hope they reconvene and make another record because it'll be fucking ace. But there was another track, they put a track on the, there's a compilation, a charity compilation for Damwell Beasley, a good 4 years ago that Ben Forrester Peaks put out, and they had like a B-side that was on that, which was called, I think it was called grab your something like pack your bags, grab your balls, and get ready for the hurricane. I might be paraphrasing that. The words hurricane and your balls were in there, and that's fucking awesome too. So yeah, I think I'm supposed to be on some kind of Japanese issue of something.
Right.
Could be talking out my ass, but
Axes seem like the sort of band that would return, play Arctangent, and then do a Japanese tour, and that'd be it.
Well, like Spinal Tap, I think so, but with less sort of exploding drummers. I hope, because Al's very nice. Yeah, Japanese. They would. I think they'd go down really well. And having no prior experience of playing Japan, I'm just guessing that they'd go down well in Japan. I'm just guessing. I'm guessing.
From Japan likes Axes. Let us know if they would go down. I'm sure you will.
Please do. I know Paul sells quite a few Human Pyramids records over there, so it's not far cry.
It's not far-fetched. Well, that's been Band on Band. I think what I normally do is I like to ask one random question that pops into my head for every guest. But I think rather than that with you, and rather than me recording an advert separately, I think this would be a good time to talk about your podcast. Because I've been listening to that a lot lately. I listened to the one with my friend of mine, John Helps.
Oh yes, yeah.
A great. I'll let you explain what your podcast is all about.
Well, that's very kind of you to advertise another podcast on a podcast. It's getting a bit meta, isn't it? But,
isn't it? Blokes talking about podcasts.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, everyone's got a podcast these days, and so have we. So it's the Alpha Male Tea Party podcast. It's called The Long Drive Home. It's all about bands' worst ever gigs. And boy, do we have some corkers from the likes of Yvette Young, from Van Covets. John Helps, as you said, his final story in that episode blew my face off. Yeah, grim. They're really grim, but it's nice because the reason we set it up is because, or the reason we did it was because when you talk like musician to musician, no one ever really wants to hear about your best gig. Like, oh, what's your best gig? Because you're like, oh, that's nice. But what you really want to do is trade like war stories and go, oh my God, this time, like we've got one coming up with Serena Cherry from Svalbard. And she's got some great stories. And we've just done, the most recent one we released was with Richard Jupp, who was the drummer for Elbow. Just a pure chance kind of message because our mate Mike Venner had been on that. Had been on his Instagram live. So I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to, because I love Elbow. So I was like, fuck it, I'm going to get it. But he didn't really talk about his worst gigs because he was in Elbow. And Elbow were an incredibly successful band for a long time. So he did talk about Beyonce and in a separate anecdote, cocaine. So it's worth a listen for that, for those reasons alone. But yeah, it's a lot of fun to do. We haven't got any more lined up just yet, but I mean, there's about 10 or 11, all in varying degrees of absurdity and anecdotes from the guests. A particular favourite of mine is our sound engineer Ben Murray. That's about episode 4, just because he's one of the funniest people I know. So that's a really good one.
Wow, that is one for people to check out after this episode, The Long Drive Home. It's on all the usual platforms, I'm assuming.
It certainly is, yes.
It's very good. I would recommend you listen to the one with John Helps because it's hilarious and it will also make you never want to go on tour.
Yeah, because we've known John sort of I've known John for a few years. He's never told me any of those stories because I don't think we've ever had the time. He's either put a show on or we've been 2 bands playing at a festival. So it was like, because I'd heard sort of through the grapevine, if you want war stories, you want John Helps. I was like, oh, like rubbing my hands with glee. And yeah, brilliant. But thank you very much for letting us plug it. And I'm glad that you enjoy it.
Yeah, thanks very much for being on Band on Band. And
it's a pleasure.
Is it.
And that's that. That is another episode of Band on Band in the books for 2021. Thank you very much to Ben from Alpha Male Tea Party for carving out some time to talk to me about axes. We had a great chat afterwards about some other hilarious tour-related stories. Again, their podcast, the Alpha Male Tea podcast, The Long Drive Home, is a good listen if you like hearing about terrible shows, apart from the Elbow episode that we mentioned. Also, I think it's worth mentioning that Alpha Male Tea Party released an album towards the tail end of 2020 called Infinity Stare, and it is coming out physically tomorrow, March the 5th. So if you are listening to this on March the 4th, when this episode is released, you've only got a day to wait till it's out and you can get it. If you're listening to this in the future, then let's hope there's still some available for you to buy. As always, Band on Band was hosted by myself, Connor P. Laws, and edited by the mysterious Riff Machine Listing, otherwise known as my good friend Oscar. Stay safe, wear a mask, wash your hands, call your mother, then let her put it on to your father so you can have a chat with them, call your friends, and have a good day. See you soon. Bye.